2, 3, 4, boom, down here to get away. Hustle, the city just wasn't made. Found a town that ain't worth noting. Skies and roads are wide and open. Feels like I'm getting back to my roots. Switched out my sneakers for a pair of boots. Just gotta find community. I know there's more.
Hello, my beautiful little flying squirrelies. Welcome back to Way Out Here, a podcast for remote and small town queers. I'm going to keep this intro a little bit short because the second half of the interview with Mike is great. So I just want to get right to it. My hot drinks of the week, a bit of coffee. You know that it's always hard in a small town politically to know what the people around you are thinking, feeling, and you don't really want to offend anyone, but you want to, be able to speak your mind or present your political affiliation. In years when Trump is running, then it feels like if you don't put something up, all you're going to see is a bunch of Trump signs, which gives the wrong idea. I was pleasantly surprised when I was at my mailbox the other day. I ended up talking to my neighbor for an hour, and she is an environmental scientist. And as she walked away, she said, "By the way, that is not my Trump sign," about one of our other neighbors. Well, yeah, I assumed so since you're an environmental scientist, but I was so pleased that she said that. And, they've seen my pride flag and stuff. And so I think that was kind of a way of showing support as well. Then at the same time that I got my Kamala signs, my neighbor put up a sign that said Trump for prison. And the other thing that happened was that my contractors who are working on my garage, they all said aside to me, like, "Oh, thanks so much. Like, we kind of just want something normal. We want Trump out of here. And I'm just glad to be working with somebody like you." And I just feel honestly like a huge weight has been lifted off because that they're kind of on the same page. It makes me feel safe, and I have no issue with whatever people want to believe in normally. But yeah, when it's a person who is directly wanting to fight against your rights and doesn't care about democracy, it's a much bigger deal. Very exciting news. I have people around me who want to see the Cheeto Man gone. Like, here we go. Thank you so much again, Mike, for being on and sharing all of your thoughts. I had such a great time. We're getting close to wrapping up season 1 of Way Out Here. So we may just have a couple more episodes. So stay tuned and I'll let you know when the last episode is here. Thanks so much.
I didn't want to think about it very often. I was deeply moved. I had like 10 experiences like this where like God would show up at a random moment in my process and like say something to me or, and it would be so deeply impactful and transformative internally, but I would not tell people what happened because it continued to affirm me as a gay person, and I knew I wasn't allowed to be gay. And transformative internally, but I would not tell people what happened because it continued to affirm me as a gay person, and I knew I wasn't allowed to be gay. So I would lose all of the reputation and clout and opportunities and connections that I had in evangelicalism if I was honest about my spirituality and my relationship with God. But I also couldn't discredit or like deny what was happening in that relationship. So I just kind of managed that tension for a while. And then eventually when I was like in my early 30s, it became like untenable for me to pretend like my internal world wasn't having these experiences, and also that I was like complicit with the external world I was part of. Like I was platformed by a really influential charismatic church, and they're publicly anti-gay.
As a preacher, or what would you call it?
Yeah, as an itinerant minister, I wore a few different hats. So like at that point, I was also an entrepreneur. And so I had built a few different businesses. So I had multiple streams of income that the church did not pay me for. And so when I started doing all this stuff at Bethel, eventually I like walked away from my job at Bethel and just like had my own income and then did all the things I wanted to do ministry wise at Bethel for free. So I was still like my credentials and my ordination was still through Bethel, but I wasn't on staff and I wasn't getting paid to do any of it. But I was teaching at the ministry school there. I was traveling and speaking all over the world as a speaker out of Bethel. I took interns and I led mission trips. I did all that stuff, but it was all for free because I wanted to do those things.
No, I understand. I mean, in Mormonism, nobody's paid for their service, but everybody is given assignments. So like you're doing all volunteer. I should say some people are paid, but up until the point of like mission, stake president, bishop, stake president, it's like there's these hierarchies and only like the 12 apostles are paid. And then the 70s, like there's stipends and stuff, but there's other benefits and stuff. But yeah, free labor, they love it. And they have 300 billion with a B dollars, and they still require unpaid.
300 billion?
You need to look into this because everybody should be afraid of the Mormon church. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, they're terrifyingly rich. They're basically a real estate corporation at this point. Yeah, I know. Shock and awe. Anyway, that's another story for another time. So you have all this, you have other income, you're volunteering, doing all this stuff, and then, like
300
literally,
billion?
I
I'm sorry.
let's get together and
I'm
talk
not.
about it for 3 hours sometime because it's, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Great. We can move on.
Yeah,
That
because
is,
you know why is the
that
members
is
pay
shocking.
their tithing, they pay 10% of their income, it's required. And it's required for salvation and exaltation because you can't go to the temple where you get exalted. Yeah. And
Oh,
so of course they're gonna have so much money, and then they just invested that themselves and into the stock market, and now they're like insanely rich and they don't give the money back, that's for sure. Oh my god, nothing makes me angrier
jeez.
about my religious
Sorry. Okay.
upbringing,
Yeah.
even so than being gay. Nothing makes me angrier than knowing how much money they have.
Wow.
Tax the church,
It's
tax the
remarkable.
church.
Right. Shoot. My goodness. Wow. Okay. Sorry. We can move on.
Tell me a little, like, were you at least like having fun? Were these experiences good and enlightening and
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I was deeply closeted throughout all of it, but aside from my sexual repression, I was having the time of my life. My dream had I had blown past what I dreamed my ministry life could look like. I was like well beyond what I thought I was going to be able to accomplish or experience. I loved it. It was so much fun. It was so cool.
in the scene?
Yeah, I just felt yeah, like
Yeah,
Christian
Christian
famous, sure.
famous.
Like that people would make fun of me and say, like, yeah. Which I hated the term, like, stop, don't say that. But yeah, like I loved the attention, I loved the spotlight, I loved the prestige, the benefits,
Yeah.
the backstage, whatever. Like that was all like really fun. But deeper than all of that, I genuinely loved getting to do something that I felt was super meaningful and
Mhm.
fulfilling to me, and like helping people and seeing them be impacted by my work. That was
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
fulfilling to me. Like the perks I just mentioned weren't worth it to do all the stuff that I did. Like traveling was exhausting at one point. I remember I was flying all the time, and I was like, I would just like to be home. I'd like to not, be sleeping on somebody else's, like another bed, another hotel, or someone's home. I would like to just stay at home for a little bit. That'd be so it was like it was fast paced and like high flying and really cool and like prestigious, but like also came with a price. I'm like, this is exhausting. But
Yeah.
every time I would like, because I'd come back from trips and be like, this is probably the last time I'm doing this for a while. And then I would like at the end of the trip, I'd be flying home and I'm like, but man, like the look in people's
Mhm.
eyes, the feedback, the tears.
It's meaningful. Your life is meaningful.
Yeah, it just so deeply rewarding. Yeah. So, yeah, I loved it. It was so cool. So apart from like the fame and the pedestaling and whatever, it was like just so fulfilling, right? And
And
I
I
loved
mean,
it.
travel can't be
Yeah,
discounted, especially when you're young. Like, I served a Mormon mission in Poland. I speak Polish now. Like, I loved living there. And like, yeah, like to get to travel, that's cool. I mean, you got to bounce around and meet people,
yeah,
and meeting people is the most important part about travel is like the culture, like, rubbing shoulders, and that's cool.
for sure. For a while there, I was only flying internationally. I was like, how come I don't ever preach in America? I was like always somewhere else. And I
Yeah.
remember one year I was like, you know what? This year I want to speak in American churches in America. I want to just like see what it's like to be
US
preaching
road
in
trip.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually did. Then I started like doing more American circuits, but yeah, like all over the world, and it was wild to watch other cultures process Jesus, the gospel, evangelicalism in their culture. I was like, whoa, that
Did
was.
you have a favorite? A favorite place you visited or a
Um,
favorite group of
Can
people?
I say my top three?
Of course,
Okay,
yeah.
probably a tie, but it's a tie between. I went to Japan a lot, so that's not fair. I went to
Mhm.
Japan like twice a year for
That's
years.
awesome. I still haven't been, and I
Oh my
really wanna
gosh.
go. It's
Japan is
yeah.
so
I know
cool.
I would
Obviously, I'm a
love
little biased, but you would
it.
love it. Oh my god. Yeah, if your best friend's Japanese and you can say my last name the way you did, you would love Japan. Anyway,
Yeah.
so Japan is definitely like up there, but then South Africa was so
I
cool. I was
love
not expecting to.
I love South
Yeah,
Africa.
it
Yeah.
was so
Obsessed.
cool.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then Ireland was also like, I don't,
Oh.
where am I? This is fascinating. Those are probably the top three coolest places that I visited. Like I really enjoyed, but like culturally, Finland was probably like my most like rewarding relationship type
Mhm.
community experiences. They were so hospitable and fun to be around.
They're so
Right? Yeah.
cozy and loving
They
and
yeah.
open
Yeah,
and
I felt so at home and at peace with them. And I'm like, what is happening? But I loved going to Finland. It was so cool. Anyway, so like the trips, different
Yeah, I
reasons, right?
mean,
But yeah.
I love to I'm like this is my ampersand tattoo. I love to honor both sides of the coin. I love to honor, yes, I was exploited for free labor. And I had a beautiful mission. I loved it. And I wouldn't have gotten the same immersion if I wasn't so passionate about it. And like there was something powerful about having meaning and feeling like I had a purpose in having a name tag and knowing exactly what to do during that time while living an international experience and learning a language and all that. So I don't know, like I honor both. Yeah. When did the cookie start to crumble? I mean, that's not the right phrase. When did the shelf, we say, when did your shelf start to break? Because it's like, all these things that you put on the shelf, you're like, oh, this is a question, this is a question. And they're like, just put it on the shelf for the afterlife. It'll be answered.
February 1st, 2020.
What happened?
So I was at home alone and I watched Miss Americana on Netflix. It had just come out the day before. Taylor Swift's documentary,
I
right?
love Taylor Swift.
I also love Taylor Swift, but I did not love
Yes.
her like I. Well, no, that's not true. I've
It's
ever
okay.
since 1989. I was
I'm
like, who is this person? What is she doing?
yes,
I'm
yes.
fascinated, and have just been on for the ride ever since. When I was in Tokyo, my interns got me tickets to her final Reputation tour show in Tokyo,
I'm a
and I
Reputation
went to it.
girly.
I was there to preach, and I was there like live watching Taylor, and I was like, "What is happening? This is
Reputation
amazing."
was the album that came out right after I left Mormonism, and I was like, this is so perfect because I'm like, fuck my reputation. Like, I don't care what
Yes.
everyone thinks about me. Ooh! Okay,
Let's go. Amazing. So yeah, I'm watching this documentary in the middle of my living room by myself. Halfway through the movie, she goes hard on like advocating for LGBTQ plus people and just like so upset about politics in Nashville. And she started saying stuff that like about advocating for gay people specifically. And I was like, I started having the onset of what I would acknowledge. Good.
I was gonna ask, where are you living at this point?
I'm in Reading. I'm
Okay, so
still
you're still in
fully
Reading.
Bethel. Yeah, yeah. I'm still in Reading. I'm still doing things I'm doing at Bethel, but things are starting to get a little sour. Like I'm starting to run into some weird problems with leaders at Bethel, making decisions and treating me in a way that was like shocking and disrespectful and dismissive. And I'm starting to get really upset about it. But it hadn't quite fully come to terms what was going on yet. So it's still the beginning phases of that. Yeah, middle phase of that. Anyway, so I'm watching this movie and I have the onset of what I would acknowledge as spiritual conviction when she's going hard about this. I'm like, she is touching something that I haven't. She knows something that I don't, and she's right. I'm missing something. And I could feel like something's off and it's hitting me on a fundamental level, and I don't know what to do with it. I'm uncomfortable with the gay thing, right? Like, please don't make me talk about this. So I just kind of left it alone. Like, I don't know, this is too raw and unfiltered for me to even be able to do something functional with it. So I just was aware that happened. 2 weeks
Cognitive
later,
dissonance. You had
yeah,
unresolved cognitive dissonance going bzzz. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, ew. So 2 weeks later, I'm pacing my living room and I'm like rage praying out loud because like things are getting a little bit more specific and frustrating with my role at Bethel. And so I'm like yelling at God about things. And in the middle of this tirade, I get interrupted by a story in Acts. It's in Acts 10. Peter goes on a roof and falls into a trance, right? And I know this story. So I'm like, and it just like drops into my head. I'm like, why is this here right now? So I pull it up on my phone and just like read the whole chunk. And so he goes on the roof, falls into a trance. A sheet comes down from heaven. In the sheet are all these animals that Jewish people aren't allowed to eat. And God says, rise, Peter, kill, eat. And Peter says, no, Lord, I've never eaten anything unclean. And God says, don't call anything unclean that I've made clean. It happens 3 times and the sheet goes back up. And that's it. And I'm like, all I know in this moment is whatever feeling I have in this moment is the same exact feeling I had 2 weeks prior with Taylor Swift. And I was like, is this about the gay thing? Is God like trying to tell me that being gay maybe at some point wasn't acceptable and suddenly now is? Like, I can't
Mm-hmm.
substantiate this. This is too whatever. So I, again, just was like, okay, I'm aware that happened. Don't know what to do with it. I'm leaving it alone. 3 weeks later, I'm in the back of my neighborhood, like in the woods, and I'm yelling. I'm literally like yelling to the universe because I'm so angry and like I just need to get the emotions out. I'm just so upset about what's happening at Bethel with me specifically and certain leaders. And then the same thing happened. I get interrupted by another passage of scripture in the Bible, and it's Jesus in the Gospels. So Luke, especially, he's rebuking the teachers of the law. I know the verses in my head, but I pull them up on Google, right? I like Google the lyrics of this passage and find it and read it. He says to the teachers of the law, you heap rules and requirements on the people without lifting a finger to help them. And then he goes off about the prophets and their tombs and the hypocrisy of this generation. And then he ends it with, you prevent people from entering the kingdom while you yourselves refuse to enter. And then that was the moment that my life changed. That was the moment that the shit hit the fan. All of the shelves
Mm-hmm.
like gave way, and I didn't have a shelf anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to recover from this moment. Because in that moment, like up until that moment, I spent 14 years having these deeply meaningful exchanges with the divine,
Right, like
affirming my
a
sexuality.
personal relationship with God.
Yeah.
Separate,
Yeah. Where
not through a mediator.
yeah. And all the while, God is going out of their way to affirm and embrace me as a gay man, and I had continued to deny and ignore and avoid what they were persistently, like, addressing. And then in this moment, like, it's like the thing had progressed, and now it wasn't just that I had continued to deny what I had experienced in my relationship with God, but now I'm also part of a platform, a church, an organization that is overtly anti-gay, anti-queer, and I'm complicit. I am participating in being
Yeah.
party with the people who are preventing people from entering the kingdom and refusing to enter myself. And I was like, shit, I am
Wow.
doing this. It became so
Really
clear.
powerful. Yeah.
It was damning and sobering and heartbreaking, and I just cried in the woods, and I made a choice from that moment forward because I knew there was so much I didn't understand. I could not theologically justify what I was hearing from God or explain and, like, align with my code of religion, right? And also honor what I was hearing from the Holy Spirit. But I made a decision that day. I was like, I will listen to anyone else who has anything to say about LGBTQ plus people. I don't even care if they're not Christians. I'm going to listen to what they're saying and actually listen instead of, like, confirmation bias and being defensive and, like, picking apart everything they're saying. I'm going to actually open my soul to considering what if what they're saying has merit.
I have to pause and acknowledge how beautiful and powerful that is, that entering the kingdom of God, like if you are religious, if you do believe in God, you're Christian, entering the kingdom of God is your relationship with him directly. It's not doing everything right that a church tells you. It's not, there's so many things that it's not. I think that's beautiful. Entering the kingdom of God is being closer to him, being near to him, or honoring what he or your inner intuition is telling you, like yeah, that's beautiful. That's really an important message. Yeah.
Thanks you. Thanks. I agree. I would push a little further and say, in my mind, entering the kingdom of God is a biblical spiritual way of describing authenticity. It's you being aligned with who you actually are and no longer, like, pretending or sacrificing the truth of your personhood for the sake of what other people think or their discomfort or their judgments or whatever. Which was a lesson I wasn't willing to know for so long. I was not willing to know that, right? I didn't want the kingdom. I wanted Christianity.
Right.
I wanted
Oof.
evangelicalism, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was like, I don't want the kingdom of God. I want evangelicalism. I want the money. I want the stage. I want the
I
spotlight. I
want the
want the prestige.
rules. I want
Yeah. I
this
want the
box that I live
control. I want
in.
the
Yeah.
power. Yeah. Gross. So finally it broke that day. It took it took a long time, but that was finally the day, the line of demarcation. I crossed the line and was like, okay, I'm gonna listen. And then sure enough, I found podcasts and books and YouTube videos and whatever, and just voraciously consumed everyone else's voices I could find who were affirming queer people, especially as it pertained to theology. And I was shocked at what I heard. I was shocked at what I found. I'm like, I cannot believe there are this many people saying this much about this. They are asking questions I've never asked in my life. And these are valid, legitimate questions. What is wrong with us? We are not honest. We are being intellectually dishonest with what we were talking about here. How dare we get up and tell people what the Bible is saying about queer people when we don't have an answer to this. So many of these questions. Anyway, so it just, like, blew my mind, like, just out of the water. I was like, we are idiots. We are bigots. We are terrified. We are lying. Like, this is not true. And so it took me probably 9 months of continuous study before the final straw or the final, like, domino fell or whatever. And I fully, as an evangelical, was convinced the Bible is not condemning LGBTQ plus
Hmm.
people. Every
Yeah.
passage, everything.
I was going to ask you about that. What did you discover in that process? Because, like, I've come across so many different studies about this as well. So, like, what do you think the Bible says or doesn't say about homosexuality?
Okay, so I don't know if it's true in what it's like for Mormons, but on my side of the tracks, there are 6 passages in the Bible that we call the clobber passages that are explicitly used to dehumanize and condemn gay people.
The clobber
Um,
passages? Is that
the
what you
clobber
said?
passages. Have you not heard that before?
I have never heard that. I love that.
Oh, yeah, the clobber
Like,
passages.
ugh.
So there's
There's
some will
like,
say 7 because
I feel like there's like two, only like two I can think of. But I want to
in the
hear, yeah,
Bible,
yeah, about homosexuality specifically.
yeah.
Yeah,
So they'll
I
reference
didn't.
Leviticus.
Okay, yeah,
They'll reference a verse in Leviticus 18 and a verse in Leviticus 20 about like the Levitical code and man shall not lie with man as they do would as he would a woman. It's an abomination. Like so, two
and
verses in
that's the
Leviticus.
one where like one of the words means like a young boy, right? Like in
Yeah.
Greek, or I guess that would be
Oh,
Hebrew.
not Greek. So you're probably talking about 1 Corinthians 6:9 or 1 Timothy 1:10, where the arsenicoitai and malakoi are put together. Paul makes up this word. Um, anyway, that so
Tell
let
me
me. I'm
more.
just
Tell
going to
me
say these in
more.
order so I
Okay,
don't get like
yeah, yeah.
derailed. So two verses in Leviticus. The Levitical priesthood prohibitions on all kinds of things: no shellfish, no mixed threads, man shall not lie with man, right? Like that stuff. There's the Sodom and Gomorrah story. So just that whole story, they take it and make it about gay people when it's not. And then 1 Corinthians 6:9, 1 Timothy 1:10, and then Romans 1. Those are the 6 passages in the Christian Bible that evangelicalism uses to condemn homosexuality. Um, the Old Testament is kind of easy. So Leviticus, there's so much in that book that we do not listen to, we don't
Right.
subscribe to, we don't, right? It's
The Old
just like, what are
Testament
we? Why are we?
is batshit crazy. I've read the whole thing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. It's why it's yeah, exactly. So anyway, Leviticus is easily like, hey, what are we talking about? Because if we really get into what this is about, this isn't about sexual ethics. This is not about sexual orientation, especially. This is about property rights. This is about how we're going to organize our ancient civilization and maintain order in this tribal experience, right? So contextually, like we're not talking about sexual orientation. This is not about male on male intercourse. This, so we're done with that, right? That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
Sodom and Gomorrah,
Plus, can I just say,
all
isn't that supposed to be the old law? Like, hello, Old Testament, old
right,
law,
right,
like all the other
yep.
laws.
Yeah, but then I don't know, for whatever reason with evangelicalism, like they get to pick and choose what old laws still apply and which ones don't.
Because there wasn't an official, it wasn't like Peter had a vision that was like now changing that old law. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you did. So,
Even though he did, even though that did happen. Anyway, Sodom and Gomorrah, um, they say like, oh, like all these men were gay and they just wanted to like rape angels, rape men, like you sin. God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of homosexuality. And that's not true. And like 12, 13 times in the Old Testament, it explicitly references the sin of Sodom was inhospitality, was being hostile toward the stranger, was not taking care of the poor. Like it explicitly describes why Sodom and Gomorrah were condemned. And evangelicals highlight those verses with Sharpie and they say this is about being gay, and it's not. And so it's just very
I
dishonest. And
know.
that's what's
Yeah.
also so frustrating is like there's so much bigotry in the way evangelicals relate to the Bible. They don't even study this text, and they use it to try and dictate other people's lives. It's like
Yeah.
so
Selective,
frustrating.
very
Right.
selective reading for
Yeah.
sure.
And then 1 Corinthians 6:9, 1 Timothy 1:10, these are lists of economic and sexual exploitative crimes. So it's like, anyway, so the word homosexuality shows up, and that word didn't even show up in the English translation of the Bible until 1946. Very
I
recent.
don't think yeah, because we used the King James version, did not have that word ever in it. Like, never even had that
Yeah.
word in
Yeah. So the
it.
RSV brought it in, and then a bunch of other translations that came after it used them as a reference, but then the RSV recanted, but they couldn't change it for 10 years because of their contract. So then
Oh
historically, it
my
just kind of
God.
circulated like crazy, and the word became homosexual when it never was to begin with for centuries. Anyway, so frustrating, so sad. And then Romans 1, this Paul is doing this didactic discourse trying to explain to the church, right, of like Jews and Gentiles in the same church in Rome. He's trying to expose the hypocrisy to help meld these contrasts of cultures into this unified body called the church, right? So he's like using the prejudice of Jewish like laws and codes to expose their judgmental hearts, right? So he's like listing all these things, and he goes hard, and he starts describing how Gentiles are just so wayward and deceived and sinful and like depraved and unnatural and whatever, right? And so there's this verse about how men exchanged natural relations with women and instead became inflamed with lust for each other, right? And that's one of the verses in this list of Paul trying to rouse and like rile up the Jewish prejudice against Gentiles, right? And so at the beginning, sorry, toward the end of that
So
chapter and
it's
into the beginning of the next,
politics. Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds
Right. Like,
familiar.
we
Yeah.
don't do that.
What?
And so then he like flips it on its head and he's like, if you had just agreed with what I just described, you're the problem. You're exactly what I'm talking about. Your prejudice is getting in the way of the
I
gospel.
see.
You don't get to hold this up against those people. And so
So don't
if you
hold
look at
that
it,
list, he's saying.
right,
If in the
if you look at it
context,
contextually, yeah, Paul is not giving prohibitions on how people are supposed to be living. He's exposing the prejudices of the day. And then, even
wow.
if we do take it literally the way the evangelical church does, Paul has no concept of sexual orientation. This is not about like attraction. This is not about intimacy or love.
Yeah.
That's right. The patriarchal pederasty culture that he's engaging in is a completely different conversation. So all these
Mm-hmm.
references that evangelicals use in the Bible to condemn homosexuality are outdated, archaic, out of
Yeah.
context, taken literally. It's so shoddy. It's not true. So anyway, it's a lot of that.
That was awesome. That was like a really good summary. Like, I love all that. I'm gonna like have to replay this and memorize so that I can
That
argue
was
with
such
my
a
family. No.
yeah, this is a very clunky, oversimplified explanation, but yeah.
Well, you should make a YouTube video if you haven't. You probably have, like, of
I made a video series on it.
with
Yeah.
pictures. Okay,
I don't
good.
have
Great.
pictures.
No, I just added that part.
Nice.
Yeah. No, we'll get to that. I want to know where all your things are at and everything like that. Okay, cool. So you have this breakdown, you have your realization, and everything's kind of coming flooding in. You're doing all this research, you're learning. So, from an interpersonal standpoint, were you finally talking to people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Sorry, I didn't even mention that.
yeah. Did you come
Yeah.
out right away? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
What happened there?
Yeah. Great question. So after that final moment in the woods where I'm yelling and like decided to listen to other people, like probably like that day, I went to my house. I had a housemate, so it was just two of us. He had been living with me through the pandemic. I went to him and came out to him that day. I was
Oh,
like, "Hey, this is going
yeah.
on."
Yeah.
And he was kind of like a deer in the headlights. He was supportive and like kind in the initially, and then he got to go on his own journey of my coming out process because he had a front row seat to the whole thing. He couldn't just like
Yeah.
sidestep and just have that moment. He just had to continue anyway. So he got to go on his own journey. But a couple days later, I pulled my sister aside. She was living up the street from me, and we're pretty close. And I was like, sorry, we're very close. I was
Yeah.
like, hey, this is
Yeah.
happening. And so I came out to her. And now she had known that I struggled with being attracted to men. Like she knew that for a while. That wasn't new. But I was like, hey, I actually believe God wants me to be this way and that it's actually, I would have said sinful at the time. It's sinful for me to
Mm-hmm.
deny who I am as a gay person and to try and
Oh,
not
it's
be this
beautiful.
person. I
Yeah.
actually believe God wants me to be like this. And she was like, whoa. So that was like a lot for her. But also like she was surprisingly receptive and supportive in that conversation, even though theologically she didn't get it yet. And so then a couple other close friends, I pulled them aside and like started to, and so then over the next few months, I started pulling certain close people, into conversations and like coming out to
Yeah.
them. And then probably a few months later, I started traveling all over the country and coming out to people.
So you're still fully believing the faith and at this point,
Yeah.
or mostly?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Mostly. I would say
and
mostly. Yeah. Yeah. Mostly.
were you planning on being celibate? Or were you thinking,
No,
okay,
no.
so you
Oh
were
God.
like, God
At
would
this point,
fully approve. It's not like, oh, I have to stay, like, I can be out, but I have to stay closeted. It's like, God wants me to be
yeah,
this,
no.
and I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
be
I can
actually
date.
out.
Actually, like probably a few months in, I was at a point where I started feeling awkward and self-conscious. Like I'm talking about all this and I'm like having these really painful conversations. I'm doing all this research,
And I'm not even
but I'm
dating
not
anyone. Yeah.
I'm not dating anybody. And I was like, I'm not dating anybody because it's easier to have these conversations when I'm still above reproach with these people.
Absolutely.
I'm like over here talking the talk, but I'm not actually walking this out. And I don't know that God has asked me to talk to anyone about this. I have been this is old language. So I apologize for anybody who's
Okay.
cringing and is triggering. I don't like it. But at the time I would have said, God hasn't called me to talk about this. God has called me to walk this out. And that freaks me out. I'd rather just talk about it. I don't want to have to embody this because then I'm going to actually receive the rocks that are getting thrown at me. They're not just like targeting my ideas. They're going to be targeting me, my identity. Right. And so I was like, I have to embody this. And so the only practical thing I know to do at this point is to go on dates with men. I've got to actually give myself the opportunity to be attracted to and experience
Yeah.
acting in that context. And so I started trying to find people to date, and it was really difficult because I didn't know how to date at all. I'd never genuinely dated at all. So I'm like early 30s, and I'm like, how do you date people? So then I started
Seriously.
like traveling. I traveled to visit Christian men in other cities in America, because like Christian was a requirement on my dating app. What at the time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what we're
Yeah.
looking
So
for. Yeah.
coming out to people, going on dates. Yeah, that was like a several month long journey. And then it just the conversations kept getting more and more volatile. I just kept watching the same thing happen over and over again of people like embracing or doubling down on their bigotry and just like throwing stupid homophobic bad exegesis versus my way, just like really stupid ideas. I'm like, you don't even know what you're talking about. How dare you say that to my face? Like
Did
you.
you ever get that from people you went on dates with? Like the internalized homophobia and like they hadn't quite resolved their
Yeah, I
queerness
didn't
and
think
how.
like
Uh-huh.
they didn't attack me, but yeah, they would like confess their own like
Okay.
internalized homophobia for sure, and I would
Okay,
feel
so
sad for them. Oh, that's
most of this was coming though from the church.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It was. I mean, the majority of the people I had relationship with were from the church at that point. So it started getting so frustrating and like exhausting that I was like, I don't think I can keep doing this. I talked to a couple of leaders at the church I was associated with and was like, okay, it's time to come out to them. They need to
Okay,
know
so
this. You
they
know what
didn't know yet.
I'm.
Yeah.
So they knew that I struggled. Some of them knew I struggled for 10 years. Like they knew about my struggle, but the conversation was different this time, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't struggle with my sexuality.
Embracing it's
Yeah,
totally
I don't
different.
struggle with
Yeah.
my sexuality. I struggle with your bigotry. I struggle with your bad theology. My sexual orientation is not a struggle at all. It comes really naturally, actually.
Yeah. That's what I
Um,
always say too.
so I had some really painful conversations with them. They went exactly the way I expected they would. And I felt like I just wanted to give them the chance. Like if they're going to reject me, I want to give them the chance to do so. Or if they're going to change their mind, like give them a chance. But either way, I'm not going to assume for them, even though I would bet really good money how this is going to go. And it went exactly the way I feared that it would. And so after that, I was like, okay, I think I need to get out of here. I think I'm done. I'm not going to spend my life trying to convince them to take an inch forward in their theology and to progress. I'm not going to, my life is worth more than that. I want to live my life. I want to be free. I want to heal. I want to grow. I want to expand. This is so toxic. I'm out. And so in that time, I also found a brilliant person doing inclusion work for queer people in the evangelical church. And he lived in Nashville, Tennessee. And so I got a hold of him, thankfully, and we got to talk a couple times in person. And I was like, I'm going to move to Nashville. I need to get around you. And he was like,
Yes. Oh my God. Nashville's awesome.
okay.
Ah.
Yeah. So I moved to Nashville like 3 years ago now, and got around him and just did a lot more. It was less theological diving and more like internal, emotional, philosophical, physiological like comprehension. Like, what does it mean to be gay? Like, and facing a lot of that internalized homophobia. And so talking to allies, especially at that point, was the most effective thing. Getting around gay people and then talking to educated advocates
Yeah.
for the LGBTQ community, with that combination, I got to humanize myself and discover the ways that I was still co-conspiring in my own diminishment, is how he would say it. And that was like a game changer for me. And so then in 2022, I came out publicly on all of my social media platforms and released my 1 hour YouTube video coming out of it. Yeah. And that was like a huge, because I still had an evangelical following at that time. Like I only like 30,000 followers on Instagram at the time, but like they were all evangelical and like mostly homophobic. And so when I came out, it was like a big deal breaker. And that's where like a lot of the hateful comments.
It shifts something for them. It like shakes the ground and they need that. Like people
Oh, yeah.
need being shaken up enough times to start questioning.
Yeah, totally. And so I hoped that it would shake ups, but yeah, I came out swinging. I was unapologetic and I confronted toxic theology from the get-go and would not stop. I did not change the subject. I just kept hitting it, and the comments just kept coming and the followers kept dropping. And it was like a really dark period of time for a while, just like experiencing so much continued persistent rejection and dehumanization.
Mm-hmm. But
But I
you
was also like
have
having to
to.
shift.
That's such an important phase. You can't just be silent. I felt that same way. Like I was silent for a year and then felt like I just had to speak up about what I'd gone through. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I needed to correct the complicity that I had with such a harmful anti-queer, career and platform. I had to correct that. I'm like, listen, I 100% need to renounce what this organization stands for and how they treat people like me. This is not okay. So I just repeatedly in different ways continued to say that out loud. And so then my branding started to change. The way people associated me changed, and what I was saying was growing. So I got back then I was doing a lot of work in the spiritual intelligence, discerning of spirits kind of vein of charismatic Christianity. So I was pretty niched down, and I didn't want to talk about that anymore. I didn't want to just keep helping straight white Christians feel more and more comfortable with themselves. I wanted to like help people who were being hurt, people like me. I wanted to like get in the way of that injustice and that oppression and be like, this has to change. There's no excuse. We have every opportunity and resource to know better, and we're not doing it. This is not okay. You guys are not okay to keep being this way in the world. So it's been like that for several years now. And that like now my work is dedicated toward helping queer people recover from evangelicalism and, you know, their Trumper family members, and getting rid of the internalized homophobia and shame and self-hatred, and their self-image getting to recover and be humanized and embraced by them again.
Oh,
It's
it's
that.
beautiful. Yeah, you have an
Yeah.
awesome platform. Like
Thank you.
it's really great. Like what kind of stuff, what kind of work do you do in person and remotely, and like other than just your
Yeah, I
platform?
rarely
Yeah.
do stuff in person, not because I don't want to. It's just, you know,
Yeah, you're connecting
people
with
who would connect with me
people
are from
all
all over.
over. Yeah.
Yeah, so like almost all of what I do is online. I do one-on-one consulting slash coaching, and then I also have group spaces that I facilitate. So hosting community and dialogue around certain subjects or certain like intersections. That's like the gist of my work right now. And then obviously content creation. I've got a podcast and a YouTube channel and social media stuff. And um,
Is
I'm like, is
your
there any,
are your groups mostly or all ex-evangelicals, or are there other faiths that come
That's a good
into it,
question.
or
They're mostly ex-evangelical. There are some people who've come from other faiths, but like we had a couple of Muslims here and there, but I think most of the religious people are coming from evangelicalism.
okay, cool. That's awesome. What do they like to talk about?
Yeah. Well, so like it depends on the group. So like for example, I have a group called the Rainbow Room. This is queer people who have left
This
evangelicalism or
is
are
my rainbow
recovering from it.
room.
Yeah. I know. I love your aesthetic. I'm like, don't look at my background.
No, it's great. It's very clean, modern.
Yeah, so in that space, they basically just like process. It's just like a space for people to catch up and process and share and grieve and celebrate and just get to have dialogue about their experiences, their internal world, their dating life, whatever, because they don't have people in their life they can talk to about these things. And so we get together and they get to, that's a safe place for them to get to process and share and support each other, give feedback, advice, you know, network, whatever. I've got a different group where these are some of them are queer. They're not all queer, but I have a deconstruction book club, so we read like specific books that I'm taking us on a journey through, and we're doing the work of like confronting these ideas and changing our minds and recognizing the bigotry and the holes in the things we were taught were gospel truth. And so that's
Hmm.
obviously a journey. But
That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, and there's another group that one of my team members hosts. That's just deconstruction, like in general. They're not reading books, but they're dialoguing and processing religious trauma, theology, like working through like I used to believe this. Oh my God, what's true now? How do we, you know, they kind of support each other through that. I've got a writers group, so it's queer people and allies we're writing, and so
Hmm.
writing projects. It's a space where we like share
That's so
writing, we
cool.
give
Yeah.
feedback and support. Anyway, so it depends on the group, but it's like stuff like that, and yeah.
That's awesome. My God, I love that. I just think that's so great. Like
Thanks.
I love the queer community so much. Like in addition to the joy of embracing your sexuality, it's like you gain this community of people that you can fully be authentic with in all the ways, not just queerness. And it's just that is such a rare thing to find.
Yeah,
And so many
yeah,
people, I think, do find that in other ways. And like, because they can, because they're not queer, they're not quite the same. And I just like have
yeah,
always been a little jealous of that feeling. And I just absolutely love being in the queer community. Like, yeah,
yeah.
it's awesome.
Same. Agreed. Same.
Yeah.
Also, just so I don't get in trouble, I have a
Yeah.
group of it's exclusively gay men. It's called right
Hmm.
now. It's called Mike's Gay Discussion Group. I'm hoping to
Yeah.
change the name of that as soon as we have a better name for it. But this is especially gay men, and they all have evangelicalism as their background. Some of them are former pastors. But I've just found like in these spaces, gay men and like the Rainbow Room has mostly been lesbians for a while. We've got some gay men in there now, but it was like me and a bunch of lesbians for like probably a year. And I just noticed the dialogue kind of delineated, and they just had different things they wanted to focus on or talk about. I was like, what is this? So naturally, it just kind of evolved that way. But anyway, I just wanted to give that group a shout out too, in case they felt left out.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, those are all awesome. I love it so
Yeah,
much. So,
thanks.
um, what like I think it would be great to hear some advice for anyone who is kind of growing up feeling the same pressures that you felt in evangelicism or a similar cult, or sorry, cult, yes, a similar high demand religion. Like some people don't like that word, but like anyone who's been raised like super religious in a homophobic religion, like what kind of advice would you give to them today, here and now?
Well, I guess it would a little bit depend on like where they are at this point, but I'm gonna assume they're like kind of still in it. They're still not sure that they're like walking away from it. And they mostly like are embracing who they are as a queer person, but they're not convinced being queer is actually okay or like acceptable or whatever. I'm assuming that's them. I'm speaking to that person. I would say you owe it to yourself to get nice and aware, nice and informed on how the bigoted ideas of anti-queerness in evangelicalism came about, the supporting power structures that perpetuate and encourage these ideas. You deserve to know better, because these are not ideas that came from God or the divine. These are ideas that came from people in power who want to control the lives of other people. And so there are some books I'd recommend, but I would say advice, like you need to read some books. You need to get some new information in your head. You spent, some of us, decades being indoctrinated to think a certain way, especially about ourselves. That doesn't go away overnight. You can't just feel that away. You need some new material, some new information to combat those ideas. And I don't know how long it's going to take each of you to do it. It took me 9 months. After all this experiencing and journeying, it took me 9 months of concerted, specific, targeted, focused study. Some people don't have the wherewithal to do that concentrated in that short period of time or whatever. And
Yeah,
it could be shorter for you. I don't know,
it
but
could be
like
shorter, it could
do
be
the work.
longer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right. Who knows how long? But if you don't do this, what I would caution you is like, how much of your own vitality do you sacrifice? Do you leave on the table, off the table? Do you not get to engage because you aren't connected to that part of yourself, because it's off limits? You like, our minds are so powerful. You don't even realize the things that you don't get to touch because you've been taught they're illegal, they're damnable, they're sinful, whatever. Like you need to reframe a lot of this, because the people who taught us these ideas are wrong. They were wrong. So I'd say read. And then another thing I'd say is like, get around queer people. I know they're scary. I know they do things that you condemn or you feel threatened by. I know purity culture really anesthetizes you from being an adult in society, but get around queer people and just like, let yourself be uncomfortable and be exposed to other kinds of people in the world. You don't need to do what they're doing. You don't need to participate necessarily, but at least try not to judge them and genuinely actually allow yourself to like care, to get
Yeah.
to know them and to connect and let them be humanized in your mind, because you spent so long in a heterosexist environment. You actually have ideas about people who are like you in our culture that are not true. They're based off propaganda and fear mongering. And so you need to go learn something else that's not real. Get into queer spaces, go to drag shows, drag brunch, go to queer dance clubs, or I don't know, go to the queer spaces that are available around you and just like get around other queer people,
Yeah,
have
meet the
conversations.
actual people. Like you will see, like as they say, the fruits or whatever. Like you will see if it's true or not what people are saying, and like
Yeah,
just try it out and see
yeah,
what people are actually like. Like
yeah. Go meet a real gay person in the
yeah.
wild.
I know drag shows, like they're so silly and fun, and it's just like it's performance and it's beautiful, and like yeah, try
Yeah.
it.
It's just like a loud journey of self-reflection. You just get mirrored back to you all of the ways that you still carry bigotry within your own bones. And let that discomfort get exposed and look at it, examine it, take responsibility for the things you allowed to be true in your mind, and replace the ones that aren't true with with truth, with things that are actually real. And so much of this has been like stripped of experience because you were just told from fearful people what to be afraid of. Like, take your life back. And the reason I'm saying all this up front is because I'm like, if you don't do this, years of your life will pass by and you don't get to experience these things. You don't get to know yourself in that way. You don't get to build these meaningful relationships with these beautiful people who would be part of your liberation. You are like withholding from your own vitality by not doing this work. So, yes, I understand it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to require energy and effort. That's true. But you have no idea how much energy and effort and discomfort you're already experiencing by not confronting this stuff. You are already paying a price.
Right, right.
It's already happening. So get out of debt and instead let the price be outside of yourself. Let the conflict be outside. Get it out of you. Get to the place where you can like love and know yourself and be aligned with who you are. And that's not going to happen by itself. You were in a coercive, indoctrinating, cultish environment that absolutely wanted to police and control your
Right.
humanity. You're
They
going to
do
have to
not
learn
have your
better.
best interest in mind. Like,
No,
so,
no.
right.
Yeah.
Get a
Yeah, yeah. So
little,
I'll let that be my
yeah,
advice. That's what I want to say to them. Yeah.
that's beautiful. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that.
No.
And I guess I would ask, like, would you have similar advice, or what would your advice be for somebody who already has left all that behind and still has maybe some of the residual trauma of growing up this way? What are the best ways toward healing, the best paths toward
Yeah.
healing?
Well,
Yeah.
the big, loud, obvious one is like therapy, right? But one thing I do want to acknowledge is I've got several clients in my world who do see a therapist regularly, and their therapists, some of them found me because their therapist is like, I don't have any experience with this. I don't have any knowledge about this world. I can't help with this stuff. Go find someone who can help specifically with the religious stuff, right? They're going to help with, So I'm like, get therapy. That's definitely an essential part of this, but also like find spaces or people who can help with the processing of the religious trauma.
Yeah.
Obviously, my coaching / consulting is a big, obvious,
Hmm.
like thing I would promote as an option, but
Yeah.
like there are lots of options out there of like find a space, whether it's a group space or a specific individual or whatever, where you can start processing this happened to me. They told me this. I believed this. I didn't do this because of this fear. Like revisit those places. I know it's painful and it's difficult. It feels like work to have to go back there, but to do that and get to reframe it for yourself and take it back for yourself is so incredibly empowering and allows you to get to become more and more of a whole person. And then you get to be that whole person in every moment you live after the fact. So, like, bite the bullet, do the work, like, get into this stuff, pull it apart, look at it, heal, recover, learn, and do better. You deserve that. You owe that to yourself. So, I would say for those people, like, get in spaces or in services or with people or whatever where you have the opportunity to safely revisit and unpack what happened to you. You're not crazy. It happened to a lot of us, and they kept us separate. And then there are so many people outside of the system who know nothing about these experiences, and so there are niche people like me popping up who are like doing this work because we are recognizing the need for it. I needed it and it didn't exist. There was no one out here who could
Yeah.
help me. I had to like hunt and find,
Yep.
so like
Yeah. You're really helping a lot
when
of
you find
people.
access to that, like,
Put it out there.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So take advantage of those opportunities and like do the work and do it now. Do it hard, do it fast. Like do it because what happens on the other side of it is so rewarding and fulfilling. And like to me, like there's nothing. It's invaluable. Like there's nothing worth exchanging for that. Getting your vitality and well being and like self respect back, feeling it safe in your own body again, being able to trust yourself again. God, that is what you can't put a price on that. Like get
You
it.
can't.
I would say
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
No, I 100% agree. Like start now, because there's so much healing on, like, throughout it and on the other side of it. And the longer
Yeah.
you
Right.
delay, the longer you delay healing. And like,
Yeah.
for me, like, I definitely had to see different specialists. Like when I first left Mormonism, I did see an ex-cult expert, and she had been in a couple cults before. So she really understood where I was coming from. And like,
Mm.
that was amazing. And then I have been in group therapy with her, and Yanya Lalik was a part of that at some point too, and just people from a variety of different high demand religions and groups. And it's just amazing how similar our experiences are, and like that's why we're able to talk about them and understand each other. And that was like a really important phase for me, but I was still closeted at the beginning of that. And at some point I needed to see a therapist who was like queer friendly and was queer and understood what that process was. And I also did EMDR reprocessing therapy for some of my specific traumas from religion. And that was like amazing as well. And so absolutely encourage like finding specialists for whatever phase of healing you're in at that time. There's going to be like
Mm.
some type of therapist or coach or somebody who understands really exactly what you are currently experiencing. And I really
Yeah.
love the group stuff because there's like power in kind of reclaiming groups and congregations. Like they're not congregations, but it's like reclaiming that setting, that social setting that we had in religion that we lost, and turning it into like a real place of love without judgment and all of that stuff. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so
Yeah.
tell us, like, last thing, tell us a little bit about what else you're working on, if there's anything that you want to mention besides that, and then where we can find you, where people can find
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
So at the recording of this hasn't happened yet. I don't know when our episode publishes, but I'm doing an allyship boot camp because I'm seeing a lot of allies in the world who are making some really weird, specific, continuous mistakes in the way that they think they're supporting queer people. And I'm like, God, can we do better? So I'm doing
I love that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Brilliant
Yeah, so that's gonna happen.
idea.
This is me responding to a need that I feel like is there. I'm like, are we going to address this? Can we do better? So that's going to happen on August 30th. If you want to join me live, if this is published after that fact, the recording is available. So you can get access to that from my website. So my website is MikeMaeshiro.com, my first and last name.com. That's where all my whatever that I'm doing is available. Follow me on Instagram. I'm pretty active on there and I'm stirring up some really good trouble. Come join the drama. It's like really fun and important, I think. And I have a podcast. But my handle is at Mike Maeshiro. All my things are going to be my name, basically. So at Mike Maeshiro. Yep. And then I also have my own podcast. So come check out the conversations that are happening over there and the things that I'm putting in that space. That's there.
Okay.
I think those
same name for the podcast as well, or does it have
okay, that's good. Sorry, my podcast is called Confessions of a Reformer. But if you look my name up in Spotify or wherever you get your podcast or music, you'll find me. Mike Maeshiro. So you can look it up either way.
Awesome. Okay, cool. That's great. Thank you so much for being on Way Out Here. This has been invaluable. I just know everybody's going to love it. And like, I loved having this conversation with you as well. And shit talking some of the fallibilities of religion a little bit, but yeah, it was super fun. So yeah,
it was an honor for me to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Normally we do a little thing that's like, we're here, we're way out here, we're queer or whatever, but you're not actually way out here. So Nashville.
I've never been way out there, which is so weird. I'm like,
I know.
I feel like I've probably had the small town experience and I have not. Like the smallest town I've ever lived in was 100,000 people. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Nashville does give the best parts of a small town experience though. It gives you like the vibe kind of like coziness. I don't know. I love it. I love East Nashville. Like that's just a great place. So I'll hopefully be out there again soon. But hopefully Taylor Swift. Yeah, we'll talk about Taylor Swift.
Send me whatever you have, please.
Hustle, so it just wasn't me. Found a town that ain't worth noting. Skies and roads are wide open. Feels like I'm gonna back to my roots. Switched out my sneakers for a pair of boots. Just gotta find community. I know there's more out here like me, cause we're here. Oh, I know we're here. Oh yeah, we're queer and way out here. Sometimes being out here really testing my patience. Ran out of swipes, had to spam my location. 500 miles ain't really that far. You know, maybe I'll fix my car. Hills and mountains and trees and stars. Beautiful, but it ain't no gay bar. So many queers across this nation. I hear everyone